Hey, welcome to Con Carolina's Television. It's Brawner here, along with my beautiful and lovely co-host.
It's me, Ray.
Not Ray, but
no,
close.
no, it's me, Nick. They can't get rid of me. If you want to
Nor
get
do
rid
we
of me,
want
you
to.
have to flame me or dox me or something.
We tried to feed him a whole bunch of chilies, and that didn't get rid of him. So,
No, dude, I love spicy food. What are you talking about?
all
Love it.
right. Well, I just a quick little update. We did during our charity stream. We did manage to raise some great money for the Youth Pride of Association, and those are the limited edition Con Carolina TV shirts uh, that were issued during that time frame, or you could buy during that time frame. And so we're very proud of that. And we thank everyone for that donated and tuned in and bought merchandise. And let's get to the business at hand.
Right on.
This episode is called Author's Corner. It's kind of like we do every time we have authors on our show. We've done high fantasy, we've done um, screenplay, books into screenplays. We've done quite a few episodes with some authors, but today we welcome acclaimed authors, and I'll let you introduce yourselves because we want to hear you speak. So we'll start with you, Kyoko.
Hi, everybody. I am Kyoko M. I am the author of the Black Parade Urban Fantasy series and the Of Cinder and Bone science fiction series. I'm also a contributor to Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, which is a short story anthology that was published by Marvel Comics and Titan Books in 2021. I'm in several of Milton Davis's really wonderful anthologies as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up because we'll bring him up in a little bit too. All right, Paul, your turn.
Hey, I'm Paul Barrett, and I just realized I wore a black shirt against the black chair, so I probably look like a floating head. Um, but I'm the author, along with a gentleman named Steve Murphy, of a couple of science fiction books called The Knights of the Flaming Stars, the series title. I also have a couple of fantasy novels and two, I guess, comedy fantasy novels, for lack of a better term. I'm also a producer of motion pictures. I've done two documentaries. And my real job when I'm not writing is I work in the film business, which means currently I'm unemployed for who knows how long.
Right, until that strike is over, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like that, there's nothing coming out nowadays because there's nothing to come out.
only the backlog, only what they have
Right.
planned anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
Only
come
what they're
fall.
force feeding us, right?
Come fall, it's going to get interesting. So,
Yeah, for
If there's
sure.
a series you ever wanted to watch, now is the time to binge it.
exactly.
Right.
I've done that actually, so it's working for me at least. Plus, I'm reading a lot more, so that also works for me.
Yeah. You could even
All right,
go
Nick.
back and hate watch Game of Thrones season 8 again.
No thanks. I'll pass. I haven't even watched the House of Dragon. I mean, I don't even know if it's good or not good.
It actually is. It's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the Wheel of Time. The season 2 comes out in September, so I'm waiting for that. Big fan, but all right, Nick. So Nick is kind of like, as everyone knows, he's the organized one of us, and he's usually he's a teacher, and he puts a lot of thought and research into stuff. So he was tasked at putting all of this together for us today. So I'm going to let him kind of kick us off and see where we go from there.
Sure thing, yeah. So first off, I'm just so happy to have the opportunity to talk with you guys. I love fiction for sure. I'm an English person. My certification for teaching is in English. When I went to college, I was an English major with a concentration in creative writing. So like the fact that I get to talk to two authors in like the best genre ever, science fiction, that is incredible. And also like some science fiction fantasy fusion from what I've seen of your works.
Love it.
Really cool. two genres that are amazing and they synergize very well together. But to start things off, I want to kind of just talk a little bit, sort of the basics, when we talk about inspiration, because there's a variety of different genres out there, and there's so many ways to tell your stories. There's so many ways to communicate the experience of multiple characters and show different cultural lenses. So I'm going to ask, like, what initially drew you to the science fiction genre? What was it about this genre that appealed to you? And were there any like specific authors or works that inspired you? What, be it, literature or even just movies, television, what brought you into sci-fi?
Ladies first.
First.
Sorry,
Ladies first.
I'm still an old-fashioned gentleman. Ladies first.
Oh,
Me
thank
too.
you very much. So for me, I would say one of the earliest memories that I have, and I actually talked about this on a recent panel with Continual, is I was probably maybe 7 or 8, and have this very distinct memory of my parents rented Batman: Mask of the Phantasm because when I was little, I was. Oh yes, exactly.
I
That
love
expression. It is phenomenal. And again, I was really small, but I distinctly remember watching this scene when it was raining in the graveyard and he was begging his parents to just, accept that he was happy and he didn't want to go through with the vow. And again, I'm like, I could have been more than 7 or 8, but that was the first thing where I knew that I was going to love Batman for the rest of my life. And I think that really kind of opened up all of these other different things that I ended up loving as well when I got a little bit older, because my parents were they never prohibited me from anything in terms of like books and and anything that was age appropriate, and so they encouraged me to read more books and look up different things and enjoy superheroes, and we were really big science fiction watchers when I was little. So that's kind of where mine came from, and definitely the DC animated canon in general. Most of the time when people talk about like who's your favorite writer, and I'm like, I have a bunch, but honestly, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, all of the ones who were responsible for it got me into not only comics but science fiction in general, just because those stories were so well told, they were well acted, it was beautiful animation. So I definitely have to credit the DCAU for that, definitely.
Heck yeah. What a great answer.
Yes.
You just got on my good side.
I know. I'm sitting here, I'm like, now we can just talk about like DC animated stuff.
Oh, that's an entire like hour-long panel we can easily do.
At least.
Keep that,
right?
Jot that name down if we do another DC thing. Animated, get Kyoko on.
I got it. I rewatch our episodes. All right, Paul, same question for you.
Yeah, so probably first thing, obviously, since I was younger, was TV, Star Trek, obviously a classic sci-fi, Space 1999.
Okay.
It's funny. I watched an episode of that. I watched the pilot episode of that not too long ago. It's available, and boy, it doesn't hold up real well.
It does not.
But still a great idea. As far as books, that watching those sort of led me into Heinlein. All the young adult books that Heinlein did, Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Rolling Stones, that sort of thing. So that was really my first foray. Then as I got older, I gravitated more toward fantasy, but I would still read. I read, the Foundation trilogy. I read, Arthur C. Clarke, all the sort of what you would consider classics.
Right.
Ray Bradbury, of course, a lot of his short stories.
Yes.
Some of that stuff I need to go back and read. But those are kind of the big ones. It is, again, I was more of a fantasy guy, but I definitely would sprinkle in some really good sci-fi there when I got a chance, or something attracted my attention with a cool looking spaceship.
Yeah, I had a when I was young, and I won't divulge my age, even though everyone probably knows it. But when I was young, I would just look for or seek out like Hugo and Nebula award-winning authors like Roger Zelazny, and he's really what got me interested in science fiction / fantasy. I love the fusion.
Mm-hmm.
The fusion excites me more than anything, and I love when people can mesh the two worlds together, whether it's through time travel or just parallel storylines or what have you. But that's and obviously Babylon 5 and Space in 1999, like you said, and then Battlestar Galactica, those kind of shows. But that was what sucked me into that. What about you, Nick? What brought you into the sci-fi realm?
Into sci-fi. I mean, my first exposure to it was Star Wars. I'm not gonna lie, but I got exposed to it as a kid. Like my parents played the original trilogy for me, and I was young. Also, around the time, it just so happened that a little thing called marketing helped a lot. Like they were bringing out new Star Wars action figures when I was a kid, despite the fact that they didn't have any new movies out until later. And then I
love Kenner.
I look back and I'm like, oh, they were trying to sell this like revamped George Lucas going back and editing the original movies. That's why I got into it. But that kind of opened me up. And then from there, I was also a huge fan of Batman the Animated Series. So good. Mask of the Phantasm, incredible movie, very, very well acted. The first animated show that I'd ever seen like blood in, like the first one that felt a little more adult, a little more serious, a little more dark and grounded and gritty. So yeah, that kind of led to me then going ahead and investigating, like just reading novels, because like Star Wars was done. I'd watched all 3 movies. Now it was time to actually just start reading about what happened later. And then I got into like all the old Star Wars novels that are now not considered canon anymore, if we want to be technical.
I mean, that's such a huge universe. I mean, it's like it was massive at that point.
Yes, true. And they had to be careful about what they did because they were trying to like mass market to a broad audience. But then from there, I got exposed to some more adult content. They had like a little bit more of like mature themes. Then I branched off from there and started getting into what people call like classical, traditional sci-fi, the things that make you scratch your head, the Philip K. Dick novels and that kind of stuff, the short stories. And yeah, so my love of the genre has kind of grown from there. Started with, a mass marketable franchise and blossomed into something else.
I suspect Star Wars brought a lot of people to younger people to the science fiction field.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Yeah, for sure. But I think one of the things, and this kind of ties into the next question I want to ask, like one thing that really drew me into Star Wars was incredible world building. Looking around and seeing that these are fully fleshed out worlds. We might be following the experiences of a set of characters and their ragtag crew. But when they go places, these feel like living, vibrant environments. They feel like real places to me.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about world building, I'd like it if you could you describe your process of creating fictional worlds? I know it's a little different with everybody. Like some people start with the world and then they build from there. And some people start with like, here's the story of the characters and then they create the world. And also within that, like what role do you think like culture, history, and like the ideas of social norms play in shaping the worlds that you create?
You want me to take this one first? Or you want it?
Yeah, go for it.
So the fantasy, the science fiction novels, space opera, really, for lack of a better way to put it. Steve and I both work on them together, and the initial start was he had 5 characters. It was the classic. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was the D&D party. Your tank, your magic user, your cleric, your thief, and then we just we threw in a cabin boy just because. We started out with the basic 5 characters and said, okay, what kind of adventures do we want to get them into? Okay, well, if these are the adventures that we want to do, where's that going to lead them, and what kind of worlds are they going to explore? So, to me, that's kind of the cool thing about at least space-based science fiction is you can create mini worlds. I mean, obviously they've done that with Star Wars, and several other authors have done it, and you can have ideas for like a cool idea for a world and sort of build around that, but you don't have to necessarily develop it as fully as you might a Middle Earth or a Xanth or anything where you have to go crazy with every detail. But you can get enough flavor in there of various ideas you have to get the point across, but still and make it seem lived in, but not have to go completely nuts with every little what are the coins and what's the political system like, unless it's germane to the story. You can tell just enough to tell the story and give the idea that, hey, we might like to go back to that world someday. It seems interesting. And then you can sort of develop from there. So that was kind of the cool thing with the Knights books is just sort of being able to go, okay, well, let's make a world that's, 14th century Earth based. And then let's make a world that's all cyberpunk corporate based, or a whole universe that's basically run by corporations, kind of like our planet. Oh, wait, sorry. So
You're
that
not
kind
wrong.
of,
Not wrong.
that's kind of the process we use. And now obviously it's a little different for the fantasy, but this is science fiction we're talking about. So that's how we do that.
Very good. Very good.
So for me, I'm a character person. Almost all of my stories start with a character that just kind of walks into my brain and it's like, hey, this is about me now. I'm like, okay, fine. Because I'm one of the people who I see my writing, I see in my head like a movie. So my process is kind of like transcribing, almost like I would be writing a screenplay, is that I just see whatever the story is and I'm writing it down as it is being chronicled to me by the characters. In terms of my particular series that's still ongoing, the new book was out in July. That one was funny because it was a dream and it had nothing to do with dragons. I had this dream that the three main characters, which are Jack, Faye, and Kamala, were all asleep in the same bed, and I somehow just knew from that image that they were in a polyamorous relationship. And I woke up the next morning, I was like, for some reason I want to write about polyamory. All right, fine. I just ran with it. But the dragon concept, I think, was one where I had already thought of, and that was the interesting part too. Originally, this series was conceptualized as a post-apocalyptic world where the dragons had already taken over and Jack and his daughter were like hunting dragons. But I started writing it and I was like, I'm so not writing that. I want it to be modern. I want it to not be an apocalypse. I want to actually have conversations about conservation and environment, the taking care of the environment or our effect on the environment, a whole bunch of other crazy concepts that got thrown into the same thing. So mine for that series was interesting just because, like I said, I had the characters really solidly. I knew who they were, and then I knew what the setting was going to be, and I just kind of combined the two, and I think it really turned out to be a lot of fun and be very interesting.
Talking about the characters telling you what to do, I saw there was a meme about a month ago said, I don't write stories. I just watch characters do stupid shit and then fill out the after action report.
You kind of brought it up, but let's talk a little bit about the cover art for your books, Kyoko. Who did the cover art for the dragon books?
The most wonderful artist in the universe. So it's done by B Rose Designs, which is designs is spelled with a Z at the end. And let's see. The original cover actually had nothing to do with dragons because I couldn't find an artist at the time. Now, this was all the way back in 2015 or between 2015 and 2016. And I couldn't seem to find any dragon covers. It was weird. Like I kept looking and I couldn't find them. So the original cover had nothing to do with dragons. It was completely different. But then about sometime into the beginning of 2017, I found her because she had made a pre-made one. And so after I bought that one from her, I had her do all the rest. And she's done, I think, out of that 6-book series, I think 3 of those were completely images that she made from scratch. Like she did it all herself. It is incredible to watch her work. And what's even crazier is I think, like I said, I think 3 of those were ones that she made specifically for me, and then the other 3 were pre-mades. But I could do like little things of like, hey, can you tweak this a little bit? And what was cool is when I asked her to do the one she did from scratch, I really gave her like one sentence. I said, okay, I think this is what the dragon looks like. This is kind of how I would like it to look. And she sent it back perfect. I never had to do one of those like back and forth where you're going like 30 times. No, she got it perfect every time.
Meant to be.
Oh yeah, it's just like I said, I sing her praises to anyone who will listen. She is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
B Rose Designs, you said?
B Rose Designs, yes.
Got it.
And Rose as in ROSE, like flower.
I will say that like having taken a look at several of those covers, like they are compelling. Like they would definitely draw an eye for sure. And while they say don't judge a book by its cover, right? You don't want to do that, but also at the same time, you want something that's going to pop. So that way, if it's on the bookshelf, somebody's going to come and at least like look at it and then look at the back, read what it's about, and then hopefully
Right.
that draws them in and you get a purchase. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can only owe my success to her absolutely phenomenal work. It's so, and when I'm at cons, it's so exciting because people will be like, they're looking around and then they look and they always do a double take, dragons, and then they run over.
Right. Right. And then Paul, I noticed that you use spacecraft, and that's always a way to draw me in. Anytime there's any kind of alien vessels or spacecraft, I'm like, I'm in.
Well, it's funny. I tell a quick story about that. The initial cover for Knight Errant, which was our first one, well, we had a previous publisher who is no longer in business, so it doesn't really matter. But we wanted a cover. A friend of ours did a cover. It was a really cool. Wish I still had a copy of the book. I do somewhere, but it was basically the main character staring out a window, looking over a planet, and you sort of in the distance see the outline of a woman that may or may not be someone he knows. And we thought it was kind of a romantic, sort of told a different story, and it was okay. But then John Hartness with Falstaff Publishing took on our books, and he said science fiction books have to have spaceship butts on them. So both of our
It's
books
so
got
true.
spaceship butts on them. So that's how those came about. And he's right. I mean, you're right, because it immediately tells you what it is. It's a science fiction book, because documentaries and fantasies don't have spaceships unless it's a really weird fantasy or an odd documentary.
Right.
But for the
So
most
since you brought up Hartness, were you guys at the last Con Carolinas?
I was not. I was at the one I think last year.
I was
The year
supposed
before?
to be, but being a freelancer, when work calls, I have to
Good answer.
I have to jump on that. Unless it's not like I'm a guest at Dragon Con this year, first time in like 15 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's the exception. If work called right now, I'd be like, can I start next Tuesday?
Right.
So
let's
coming again in the future. That's my question.
What's that?
Are you open to coming again in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've wanted to come every time.
that Authors Alley guest list fills up so fast.
Yeah.
So you really got to be on it. As soon as he opens up that registration stuff, boom, be on it. Or,
Yeah.
You can buy for, being a guest, so.
And I love going there because the hotel is literally a mile and a half from where I live.
Yeah.
Nice.
Maybe 2 miles. So
Yeah.
the perfect con for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I noticed that you did say that you were doing, a panel at a convention. So is that something that you do a lot? Do you do a lot of panels and attend a lot of different conventions? And do you sell your books at conventions?
I wouldn't say a lot. I've been to maybe a grand total of 6 over the past 3 years. Mainly because, and it has happened more than once, that I would get invited to a con and work would come up. It's kind of the running joke now that if I'm out of work, just get signed up to be at a con, and the call will come in. Yeah, I've done Raven Con. I've done a Congregate up in Winston was the last one I did, and the books sell, I guess, okay. That would be more of a question for John. We will do signings and we will have them out there, but we're not well known enough yet to. We need that TikTok person to come along and film us sitting there looking forlorn. So our books will become bestsellers like that one guy. But yeah, I mean, they do well enough, but it's just as much about going and meeting people and seeing who's out
Networking and,
and meeting other authors and meeting, people like that and learning from their experiences and getting pointers on how to do stuff. So that, and of course drinking. So that as much
the parties, yeah.
I mean, there's truth to that.
Is a reason to go. So
You can't forget the alcoholic cupcakes that they had at our con. So they were great.
Yeah, every con's got a party floor.
Of
Yeah.
course.
And this is water, not vodka, as far as you know.
As far as we know.
Right. Full disclosure, no. Okay.
I
All
drank
right,
that
Nick.
outside
I'm
the
sorry
hour.
for interjecting.
Why are
wouldn't
you,
be happy
what?
with that.
What do you mean you're sorry for asking our guests some questions? These don't all have to come from me. But
No, but I
with
just
that
don't want
in
to step on your toes. I'm the funny guy, so
you're not stepping on toes.
I'm also very heavy. So if I would crush your toes.
No. I mean, I'm tempted to just ask a bunch of selfish questions like, will you come and will you hang out with me at con? But instead, I will be professional and I will focus on the things that I guess matter. Next one is a big one, and it's themes. And I know that this is one of like the big hitting things because what's the point of telling a story if it doesn't have some sort of message? If there's not something to it that is compelling, and if there's not something that people can get from it. You know, people talk about like you read to learn lessons, and I feel like that's a little campy, you know, but like you do read to see other experiences and become like see through a cultural lens, see through the perspective of somebody who's different or similar to yourself. When it comes to science fiction, it often serves as a platform to discuss complex social, political, and philosophical ideas. So, what
Sure.
themes do you find yourself as an author most drawn to exploring in your work? What sort of ideas do you tend to gravitate toward? Or if that's like putting you in a corner, um, what is what are some compelling themes that you have included in your work that you feel like people should be exposed to?
I can answer that one. So for the of Cinder Bones series in particular, after I decided I didn't want to do the post-apocalyptic idea, I was very passionate about making the dragons like they were real animals, and so that took like a year of research. I even called up MIT and I got an appointment with a postdoc in the microbiology department. It was very extensive, but the point I'm arriving at is that as I was conceptualizing the series itself, I really took a heavy inspiration from Jurassic Park. In terms of the I have actually read the book when I was a kid, but I really liked the movie. And one thing that I love, even the entire movie is chock full of amazing scenes. I have most of them memorized. The lunch scene, for whatever reason, when I became an adult, I really love that conversation. I love listening to them talk about the morality of whether or not just because that technology is available, that doesn't mean that you necessarily should use it in the way that you do or use it for profit. And honestly, now that we're in this horrifying age of AI, it was like, oops, Jurassic Park was kind of telling the future in a way,
Right.
in a big
Crystal
way.
ball there. Yeah.
I mean, because as soon as it became available, the people did not hesitate to start using the AI for improper and immoral reasons. Now, not all of it, some of it is completely benign, but boy, they ran after those immoral parts. And so that is really what I wanted to do for this particular series. It's not so much of like beating you on the head with, oh, you don't hurt the environment, you're bad. It was more about, again, that theme of, is it moral to take technology and use it for certain reasons? It needs to be done for the right reasons. And so what I took, the difference that I have between my books and Jurassic Park, though, is that what Jack is doing with the Resurrection Project is for conservation and study. It is not for profit. And really what happens to him is what happens in real life, which is I had these really great noble intentions and then someone else went and screwed it all up and ruined everything for everybody.
Right.
And so I think the theme that I was going with there is just understanding that you can have the best intentions and have a project and fulfill the things that you're going to do, but at the same time you have to consider that someone might come along and take it in a direction that it was not meant to go, and then you have to adjust. You have to take responsibility for yourself and what you do. But I mean, overall, I think that it's very important for people to realize the effect that we have on not only each other, but our societies affect the environment and vice versa. So I think that's really what I decided to kind of dig into with this particular series.
That is cool. I like that. I like that you like you say you're inspired by Jurassic Park, but then it sounds like from this conception, like the character that needs to potentially learn from their mistakes. It seems like by design, it's not so cut and dry. Like with Dr. Hammond, like looking back on Jurassic Park, like he is clearly the villain in the story because like his own criminal ineptitude and like negligence and avoiding all safety precautions and getting warnings and everything made it so that like he caused this whole disaster. And then the both, I mean, the book somewhat, but definitely the movie goes at great lengths to like redeem him a little bit, or like it tries to play him sympathetic after he's caused so much suffering and so much death needlessly. And that's always, it's difficult, as a modern reader, especially looking for those logical inconsistencies.
Well, what was interesting is someone made a post on Tumblr talking about, they're like, well, Jurassic Park is a giant warning against for one, underpaying people, and two, having all of it be reliant on one person for your whole park system to be reliant on Nedry, and then he's disgruntled. No,
don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's for sure.
Yeah, do not put all your eggs in that, especially since it was related to IT in particular. It's like that's a bad.
And they're dinosaur eggs for
Thank you. I mean, it was completely irresponsible on both sides. But it was interesting with that post though, because I had never thought about it in the context of because again, Nedry is definitely portrayed negatively in the film. But when they brought that point up, I was like, wow, you know what? I've seen this movie like 30 times. And I was like, that's a good point. I didn't really think about it from that angle. And in a way, again, I feel like that film has a lot of lessons to teach us that we weren't even ready for at the time.
Right. Which made it so poignant at the time.
All right. Well, and thank you for that response. I thought that was brilliant. Paul, same question. Themes. How do you approach it? Where do they come from? What are some?
A little underdressed. As far as the Knights of the Flaming Star books, I mean, they're written to be just out and out fun action adventure things. To paraphrase Mark Twain, those looking to find a moral will be shot. Those actually finding one will be shot again. But I guess subtly there are themes in there about bullying. The bullies shouldn't win. Justice should be served. The knights, to a certain extent, without the superpowers, are kind of superheroes. They go in and they go after the bad guys and they win the day. I mean, they're a little more gray than Superman or any of those, but it really is just kind of about meting out justice. And with those novels, now with the Necromancer novels and some of the other fantasy stuff, I go a little more into that. The Necromancer books especially are about the nature of evil and what one person may perceive as evil isn't necessarily or can be turned to good. I go into LGBT themes in there because two of the side characters are gay. The main character has a little bit of trouble accepting that, and that's part of his journey, is to come to learn to accept that and then to realize that, okay, you're a necromancer. Who are you to say what's unnatural, kind of thing. And then my Spade Case Files, which is my dwarf detective series, as I call it, it's J.R.R. Tolkien meets Elmore Leonard, goes into themes of classism, racism, because all the humans at the top and then everybody else and the elves and then everybody else is second-class citizens. I mean, it's a theme that's been done before in other fantasy, but it is something I definitely like to explore with that particular character especially. So yeah, the fantasy I think is more theme heavy than the science fiction, but and Steve, if he was here, may have a different answer. He'd go, no, it's about this and it's about that. It's about how you should always have guns. I don't know. That would be a question for him. So, Steve used to be a police officer. That's why I say that jokingly. So
an interesting swath of spectrum where we've got like inclusion and then Second Amendment rights.
It really is like bizarre. I mean, almost bizarre in today's day and age to have those kind of schools of thought be, simultaneous almost.
Yeah, true. Well, you have to include people with their Second Amendment rights. Oh.
True. So coming off of that, like you kind of hit on a bunch of the same notes for like my next question, which is all about diversity. And I know fantasy is a genre that's close to my heart. If you don't know, some of our viewers know because they hear me talk about it all the time, but I run a LARP that's set in a fantasy setting. And a constant critique that fantasy sometimes gets as a genre is that it's very focused on like a narrow white masculine perspective, or at least a lot of the classics were. And thankfully, modern authors are doing so much to get away from that, to broaden the perspective, to be much more inclusive in their writing, which is incredibly important. We need to have stories told from a variety of different perspectives, no matter who is telling them. So, Mike, I guess my question is, how do you approach representing diverse voices and perspectives within your own science fiction narratives? And let's start this one with Miyoko.
For mine in particular, like I said, I had that image of Jack, Kamala, and Faye together, so I knew that they were going to be that. But the thing is, Kamala in particular, the character's name is Dr. Kamala Anjali, and she is named after Kamala Khan because I love Kamala Khan. And one thing that I noticed as I was putting together the pieces of what I wanted to write in that first book, and I was like, okay, so from an American standpoint, why are there not any Middle Eastern or Indian people in science fiction? In major science fiction works. It was bothering me. I was like, I don't understand why this is not a thing. It should kind of be. Even when I was looking around for different types of examples to kind of guide myself when I started the book, and I still was not really, again, on the American side of things. Worldwide, much better. But on our side of the pond, not really. And I really wanted her to be not only the main lead, but not just the love interest. She is her own character. She is the one that actually causes the breakthrough in their project to allow them to go forward cloning the dragons. And I wanted her to be more than because again, as Americans, what do they know if you say India? They say Bollywood. Americans don't really know anything about Indian culture or Middle Eastern culture. And so to me, I really wanted to introduce this character and have different cultural aspects of her, and let people see the differences between the way that she lives her life, the way that Jack and Faye do. But at the same time, it's not viewed as something odd or strange or alien. I really wanted her to be a fully fledged character that everybody could relate to, even though she has a background that's a little bit different from what your average person would expect in a science fiction story. And I think similarly, because she and Faye are both bisexual and in love with each other, that was another aspect that I really wanted to kind of play around with and explore. Because up until that point, I've had a few bisexual characters in my other series, but it wasn't really focused on that. And so that was one thing that I got to play around with over the course of this particular series. But to me, I think that I all of my stories are going to be diverse. It doesn't matter who I write for, if it's a screenplay, a movie, a book, any of that, because it matters. It matters when little kids get to grow up and see themselves in different things. Like I got so excited for a lot of the recent stuff that's come out, like Into the Spider-Verse. Oh my God. I was sitting here with tears in my eyes. I'm just thinking about all these little black boys that are going to be dressed up as Miles and Halloween. It's going to be so
blown
cute.
away. Yeah, I was blown away by that.
I was delighted. And same thing actually with Falcon and Winter Soldier when Sam put on the Stars and Stripes. And I was just like, oh, that's my shit, bro. Just little things like that. But like I said, that's why all of my stories need to be like that. I want that person who has not seen themselves in these particular stories, and I want them to be able to see themselves in it.
That is awesome. Before you jump in there, you did bring up Into the Spider-Verse, and you brought up the idea of people dressing up as Miles, and I'm so happy to report. So I went to GalaxyCon recently, and I dressed up as Peter B. Parker from that movie.
The love of my life. Oh my God, I love him.
And I was the spoiler alert from the new one. I had like the baby and everything, and
the
bathrobe.
Yay.
Yeah, but I will say there was only one other Peter B. Parker that I saw at the convention, but there were so many Miles, and that was amazing to see. Like he has taken it over. I honestly think that at this point they should just go with Miles as the live action version of the character. That's kind of the future of the character. It's been so well done. Peter's had a lot of really good stories. Keep him in as a mentor, make him an older guy. But Miles is incredible. And to see that so many young men are inspired and they're coming and they're bringing that energy, it like gave me so much joy. I have so many pictures of me with different Mileses, like doing different poses. Absolute blast.
That's so great. So actually, funnily enough, so I'm going to be at Multiverse Con towards the end of October. I'm going to Spider-Gwen. I'm totally going to Spider-Gwen.
Nice.
I'm excited. I found all the pieces to the cosplay. I'm going to assemble them next month, and then you're going to see it.
I don't think Tom Holland's done quite just yet, though. I think he's got some left in him.
That's what I was thinking. The way that it's going, my thinking is they're going to move him into kind of like a mini leadership position. Like they're going to do a Young Avengers team, and then like a little bit further out, they'll introduce Miles, because we already saw that the Prowler exists now. So I think that's what's coming. I think they're going to kind of like he'll get a little bit older, get to like about college age, and then they'll introduce Miles. That's my theory.
But also like Tom Holland. Yes, Tom Holland was an incredible Peter Parker. Sorry, I know we're on like a weird comic tangent now, but
it happens.
He's also like 26 or 27, and he's getting to be like, let him age the character up, keep him as Peter, but then bring in like a teenage Miles that he's like maybe in something of a mentoring role. That would be so cool, because Spider-Man started out as a high schooler. He started out as a kid. So bring in a new kid, have Peter have to impart the wisdom that he learned from having a similar experience to somebody who is like with the zeitgeist of the time. Anyway.
After seeing the second movie, all I want to say is I want more Spider-Cat.
Who doesn't?
I want Spider everything. I'm a Batman guy, and literally I'm sitting in what we call Batman Studios. I have like, it's incredible, but yeah, anything Spiders, fine with me. I'll take all versions of it. Or
Peter Park's car.
Yeah, that was a good one. Like that.
But Paul, I'm so sorry. We went on like a whole nerd tangent.
No,
I'm not that sorry, because it was fun.
That's the way these things should be freeformed. Otherwise, they just seem scripted and they get dull. So,
that's 100% true. We totally agree.
Yeah, Spider-Man Noir.
As far as representation, with the science fiction novel, with the science fiction novels, we first started writing them. Steve and I have known each other for over 40 years. So we first started writing them when we were in our early 20s. And that was in the 80s. So that gives you an idea of how ancient I am. And we wrote from what we knew, which was white guys. So as a result, the two human leads are Caucasian. It's a man and a woman. The aliens are sort of alien creatures, and we've sort of tried to come up with their own cultures for them. Now, that's the first book. The second book, we've started trying to add in a little more of that. And representing and adding in different cultures can always be a little bit of a third rail, because you want to respect it and you want to do it correctly, but there's always that chance that you're going to step over and do the wrong thing, and you need to calm down over there. Sorry, one of the cats is going insane. And there's always that chance that you're going to say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing through no malevolence or no fault, and get sort of raped for it. And so you got to make sure when you're talking about it that you're talking about it correctly, out of a place of respect and doing it right. So we are slowly starting to introduce some characters that are not white, and also human. So there is an Indian character, one of the doctors, an Indian in the sense that they sort of represent an Indian or a Middle Eastern perspective, but of course they're from another planet. But our assumption is that as humans spread out, the culture spread out, and so different planets was, found by different humans, and so the culture sort of segregated a little bit, but blended enough to still get along. And again, we don't approach it that much, again, only because it is just sort of out and out. We're trying to just have a fun adventure. Again, with the fantasy novels, I play around with that a little more because that's how I wanted them to go, because it is an Earth-like planet. So you do have different countries and civilizations, which shouldn't all be bland lily white or lily yellow or, all one color or type of being or person. There should be some, that's just good storytelling first off. And it does help represent the, cultures that exist. The nice thing about fantasy, I think, well, in science fiction to a certain extent, is you can get cultural norms, you can slip cultural norms in there that someone might not read and accept if it were an Earth-based person. I mean, Gene, let's face it, Star Trek was the original for that. That's so I always love these people now. When did Star Trek go woke? Oh, I don't know.
Oh my.
3.
That was one of the funniest reactions I heard too when they started complaining about that. And people were gleefully showing the receipts. They were like, here, let me give you every single example of what this has been talking about the whole time. You were not paying attention or ignoring it on purpose.
That's like people like, I love Pink Floyd, man, but I wish Roger Waters wasn't political. Okay, well then you never really listened to Pink Floyd.
What?
If you think Roger Waters was not political to begin with.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, how can you do that? Songs about like non-conformity and that's insane. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's crazy.
Just to interject for a second, that the chat is getting a little bit vicious and they're attacking my love for Batman. I'm just saying,
I'm sorry. You better not point me in the direction. I have a bat signal tattooed right here. I will fight people. We are not going to talk mess about this.
Our resident elder being, whose name is Zargnor, he's also on our network, said it's all right. It's all right. You're forgiven, kind of thing.
Don't hate on Batman. Batman's wonderful.
Batman is life.
He is. It's an entire lifestyle. I have so many Batman, but I can't tilt it because it'll probably make everyone motion sick. There's a giant Batman poster right here.
Batman is probably the most relatable fictional rich guy.
I was gonna say, like, I've been getting frustrated lately because people are now transferring their anger at real billionaires onto Bruce, and I'm like, that's not why he's here. We created a fictional billionaire who's benevolent and cares about his fellow man and does the right thing with his money, because the ones in our world don't do that. Right. So like, keep the anger at the real ones, leave him alone. He not to say you can't criticize him, but like, that stuff is driving me up the wall. It's like, stop doing that. He's not real. He's not doing all the stuff that our billionaires are doing.
Right. No, if you understand the character, like, that his whole thing, like, he doesn't care about the money. He's using it to finance his war on crime. His own intentions and motives are elsewhere. Meanwhile, in real life, they're really trying to get as much profit as possible at your expense. Those are two very different things. But that can be hard, separating the real world, what's actually going on, what they see, versus what they read, what they watch. Yeah, it's an interesting culture we're in today.
Fascinating.
But we're talking about sci-fi. We're talking about not necessarily the way that things are, but the way that they could be. In some cases, if you're reading something that's a little bit more scientific utopian, the way they should be, or dystopian, the way that they should not be, cautionary tales. So with this next one, I want to talk about technology. Because how can we have science fiction? How can we have a talk about that without discussing the role that technology plays and how it is portrayed in fiction? And I guess my first question has to do with sort of this balancing act, because I think we all have seen in our own lives that technology can be a wonderful thing, and technology can be misused, and it can be used for terrible purposes. So in your own works, how do you balance both the allure of futuristic technology and the potential that it provides with the potential cautionary tales about its misuse and what evils, what catastrophes could happen if technology is used in a way that is completely unethical?
Why don't you go first, Paul?
Okay. We and the other problem with doing technology and sci-fi is that it can quickly outstrip your sci-fi story. I mean, the stuff that they posed in Star Trek we have now. and it's just getting faster and faster. So the cool genetics thing of this year you put in your story, or extrapolate something 30 years out, and suddenly in 5 years they've done it. So that's always an interesting challenge too. But with ours, technology of course exists. We do hint at the fact that robots are no longer allowed, except for specific. They cannot have any higher functioning abilities, because we hint at the fact that there was some sort of revolution or revolt at one point, and the universe just decided to do away with robots that perform past a certain function. So that's one thing we sort of addressed. And in ours, technology is in fact used quite a bit for evil purposes, because that's again sort of the story is trying to go after the bad guys, and there's these corporations that want the technology that our main guys have, our heroes have, and they want to take it and well, there's a theme, I guess. So yeah, they want to take the technology this group has and is using for good and exploit it and weaponize it, and not to sound too megalomaniacal, but take over the galaxy, essentially. With in the first book, now the second book, of course, is a totally different one, but the first one we do sort of play around with the fact that the benevolence of a technology can quickly be turned around on its head and made, and that's sort of a classic in sci-fi, the creating the laser beam that mines the earth and turning it into a weapon is sort of a trope. But it's a good read. It's a good thing to do with sci-fi, and it's a good way to get it across, because you can't extrapolate and talk about things that don't exist yet, but they could. Again, Jurassic Park, prime example. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. We sort of lean into it. The technology can be used either way. It's not the fire that's holding it. Bless you.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's kind of how we deal with it. Is just technology in and of itself is neither good. Well, for the most part, it's neither good nor evil. It's a matter of who's got their finger on the button.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Kyoko, same question.
So that's kind of what kicks off the entire first book in the Cinder and Bone series, is that they were successful in cloning a little harmless dragon, no bigger than an iguana, just a little thing. And it wasn't going to get any bigger than that, except for a giant accident. But that is really what I wanted to focus on in the moral aspects of it, the stuff that I really, really wanted to dig into in terms of, like I said, because Jurassic Park was a huge influence, is that all of those good intentions that he had were immediately turned into something horrifying. So essentially what happened is the Yakuza steal both the research and the dragon itself and take it back to Tokyo and start experimenting on it to figure out how to clone it themselves. But what they want to do is just clone thousands of dragons so that the entire world will go back into the dragon hunting phase it was in the earlier part of their history. So in their history, around the 1400s, all dragons were hunted to extinction because everybody became obsessed with dragon hunting. And so that was what they were trying to undo. They were like, we killed them all, so we couldn't study them and learn about what effects did they have on their environment? What did they eat? How did they procreate? All these different, there were about 37 species of dragon in the series. And so with them a lot of it is Jack struggling with, because he knows that, yes, I have the technology to just go make more dragons myself, but you took my baby. I'm not going to just let you take my baby. So he made the decision. He and Kamala make the decision to go get it back, even though they know they could just go clone some more, because of that moral center that they both have, that they worked so hard to try and make a better world where we could understand these creatures. There's the line that I repeat a lot is, just because something's dangerous doesn't mean it has no place in the world. And that's kind of like the motif of that particular series, is just that, yes, no, they can be a menace, they can be a nuisance, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve to exist, because they've existed before until we meddled with it, and now they don't. And so that's really, I think, the way that the story, all of the stories, all 6 of the books kind of deal with it in a way, but most of it is mostly in that first one.
Yeah, not to mention what you said earlier is that I mean the research that went into making that book and the technology aspect of it, going to MIT, getting all this data. It took you said like a year,
Yeah, it took a solid year of
which
research.
yeah, which is pretty awesome, pretty dedicated. I love that.
That is incredible.
Hats off to you. Research is a four-letter word to me.
Oh, and trust me, it was hard. You could go down into some wormholes and never come out of it again.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really have to thank the postdoc that I spoke to, because so what ended up happening, and we can move on in a minute. So basically what I did, I went to MIT's website, and then I looked in the right department, and I went, okay, well, let me see who's nice enough to humor me. And I emailed their entire department, and then two people reached out to me and said, oh, okay, well, based on what you're describing, we have two people we recommend for you. And one of them, I emailed her, and she responded back, and I was like, I'm going to ask you some super weird questions. Are you okay with that? She's like, go for it. So that was really fun. She was such a good sport. I asked her the weirdest stuff.
I love people like that.
Me too. That's one thing I do actually love about the writing process. I don't love editing, but I love when I have a piece of research that's not available in Google and I need to go speak to a person, because most of the time people are so excited to tell me about what they do. An example of, still have the voicemail just because I had to call the Boston FAA for a action sequence that's in, I think, maybe book 3 or 4. And I left them a voicemail, and the lady got back to me after a certain point. But what was really cool is that I talked to her, she gave me the research, and then a week later she called to make sure that the other research I had requested from someone else, that I got through to them. I was like, oh my God, this lady cares so much about this random author who just asked her some questions about helicopters, and she like checked up on me to make sure that I got what I needed. Like I adore people in that regard. Like almost every person I've talked to related to my research has been so great.
That is awesome. It is incredible, and like it's so valuable
for our society too.
Yeah.
It makes you feel just a little bit better about the state of things when you see that people are really happy and open to talk to you about what they do when it relates to your books.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, we are approaching the end of our time, but I think before we wrap up, I'm going to give you guys one sort of lightning round question, and you can answer this as briefly as you want to, or I guess we maybe have a couple more minutes. If you want to go in depth, you can. So we've been talking about science fiction, and there's many different genres that one could write in, but obviously you have chosen, at least at some point in time, to write in sci-fi. So what specifically about science fiction do you find most rewarding? Why write in sci-fi? Why is this a genre of importance to you?
I think because you can tell the story you want to tell, and the possibilities, as long as you keep it internally and externally consistent, are only limited by what you can come up with. And in that respect, it and fantasy are similar. I mean, there's different constraints, obviously, but yeah, if there's a technology you want to create, you create it, and you play around with it, and you do things with it. If there's strange alien species you want to come up with, you do that. So that, to me, it's the boundless imagination that's allowed within science fiction, I think, is what draws me to it anyway.
I think I find it to be a challenge in a really good way. Like I loved all of the research that I had to do to make dragons seem as if they were real creatures. So, what they ate, how they procreate, behavioral patterns, and how intelligent are they. All of those little things were so much fun to just dig up and discover, just to know stuff, just that I know it. But it was a really fun challenge of taking that baseline of real science and then adding on top of it. That's kind of how I perceive science fiction, is you have this baseline of real science, and then you just go and play around with possibilities of things that could exist someday. Some stuff is too impossible, but I like getting as close as I can to how it would be in our world, just because life is very frustrating, at least for me. I don't know about everybody else. And so, like, getting to see possibilities that may not come within my lifetime is really fun. Like I like to write all these different scenarios I may or may not experience at some point in life, but I think that that's what the fun part is coming up with all of those original concepts that could be something that happens a little bit later in our history or in our future, as a species.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that like the potential that is there, the idea that working through a framework of it has some basis in something that we know in this world, some sort of scientific discovery, and then letting your imagination sort of fill in the blanks and then
And
take
push the envelope.
Incredible. Okay, one final. This is an indulgence. Okay, I have one final question.
Okay.
Of course you do.
Star Wars or Star Trek? You have to pick one.
Why
You
not
can't say
both?
both. No middle grounding. No middle grounding.
I'm gonna lose friends because I'm like I mean I'm not really into either one. Star Wars. I've never seen Star Trek. Not for any horrible don't like it reasons. It's literally I'm 34, and so when I was growing up, it just wasn't on TV. So by the time I got to an adult, I looked at how much there was, and I was like, it's so long. There's just so much content that it just kind of in a way scared me. I was just like, I don't know. Okay, so let's just go with Star Wars because at least like it's a trilogy. I do not acknowledge the prequels, and I never will. So I am a Star Wars person.
Wow. I'm gonna have to go with Star Wars only because it did sort of hit at that formidable, you know the word I'm looking for.
Right.
I was 12 years old when the first one came out, and I saw it at the theater over 100 times.
Indelible impression.
Did you say over 100?
Yeah. My grandparents would drop
Wow.
me off at the theater, and I'd stay for all 6 shows for
Yeah.
like
Wow.
2 weeks.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
That's insane. And
That is incredible. I was gonna say I thought I was bad. I've only seen three movies I've seen in theaters 4 times: Avengers, The Dark Knight, Thor Ragnarok, and No Way Home. Every other.
Those are great
It would
choices.
scare you the number of times I've seen certain movies at the theater.
Oh wow!
Especially when I was younger. Now I don't get out as much anymore because
well, also movie tickets are like $20.
Yeah.
At least back then they were like.
There used to be like $2 Tuesdays,
Yeah.
You got streaming services. There's a lot of at-home options too.
But yeah, so I'll say Star Wars again only because it was sort of at a formative point in my life, and I mean I liked Star Trek as a kid, but of course I was a kid and didn't necessarily get all the nuances. I've grown to like it more and understand it more. But Star Wars
and it's held up really.
Yeah, and we'll always, Star Wars will always hold that special place in my heart, despite how much they keep trying to ruin it on Disney Plus. But that's a whole other topic.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that is also another hour-long panel we could talk about.
That is very true. Oh my gosh,
they've had hit and misses. That's all I'm gonna say.
I was gonna say, I definitely don't dump on all of it. It's been hit or miss, and it just kind of goes.
Same with the MCU. I mean, they've had hit or misses too on there too.
And I'll just get a quick little name drop out here talking about Star Wars movie I did 6 months ago. Bless you. I got to work with Ewan McGregor.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yay.
So that was pretty cool.
Him.
And
is he really a vampire? Because I believe it. Because like people have put up pictures of him like 20 years ago and now, and they're like, that's not normal.
Right?
It's true. He does still look really good. And he is as nice and as cool as you would think he would be.
Oh,
that's great to hear. That's great to hear. All right. Well, that brings our show to its end. And I'd like to thank you guys for being on the show and sharing your brains with us and your thought processes. And Nick, thank you for the preparation as always that went into the show. I would like to definitely invite you next Thursday, 7:30, same bat channel, same bat time. See what I did there? And we look forward to seeing you then. We are going to raid into Nev. So even though he made, a slight mark on Batman, we're going to raid over to him. So if you're in the chat, and thank you, chat, Your participation was awesome, and the chat was great. I was watching it the whole time.
And also,
But
huge thank you, Paul and Kyoko, for your time. Like, you gave such
100%.
insightful answers. That was incredible. I love your exploration of all of those different topics. So thank you so much for being here. It was
Thank
a
you.
true joy and a pleasure to be able to
it
discuss it
was
with you.
so
Thank you so much
good.
for having us.
All right, until next week, we'll see you next time. Go to
Bye.
concarolinas.org and get the tickets. They're on pre special right now. So do that.
Cool.
Peace, love. Thanks, guys.